DeAndre Hopkins visited the Titans, then he visited the Patriots, but could he end up with a true contender? That plus Dalvin Cook is hoping to pair with the former All-Pro receiver. And let's look at some buyer's remorse when it comes to aging veterans like Hopkins and Cook.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi again, everyone, and welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast. I'm James Rapien. He is Tony Wiggins. Welcome into a Wednesday edition. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. And make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Follow wherever you get your podcast. And Tony, well, we're about 5 weeks away from training camp starting across the NFL, and there are still plenty of big names available. DeAndre Hopkins, probably the top free agent available. He's taken a couple of visits with teams, still hasn't signed. And earlier this week, he said that, or Albert Breer, rather, Sports Illustrated, he was on NBC Sports Boston, said that Hopkins, as well as the meeting went with Bill Belichick and the Patriots, and how much he respects Mike Vrabel and the Titans, that deep down Hopkins might be hoping to latch onto a true contender. Would this be the right call, taking less to go to maybe a Kansas City or a Buffalo, or do you think that he should try to get as much money as he can at this stage of his career?
I don't pockets and say I know how he's invested, because I don't know. But I think whether he wants to or not, he is at that point in his career where you need to be chasing titles. Because 3 years ago when he left Houston, he was on all of our radar as a first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't think he's there now. I think these last couple of years with the suspension and the injuries, as well as the way everything went in Arizona, I just don't believe he's still that surefire bet. And I know if we look at his stats, they probably still screen. All he has to do is average another 2 or 3 pretty average years by his standards, and he's going to have the numbers to get him home. But I do think the ugliness of the way things have transpired since he left Houston and with Arizona, I just think he needs to do something. I think he needs to do something, and that means usually winning a title and being a very important part of that title is what you have to do in order to get what he wants. So I don't want to count his pockets, and I never draw a line and say where somebody has made enough money. That's not my place to do that. But I will tell you this: if I were him, I would be looking for a championship. I would be looking for somewhere where I can make a contribution that's huge, even though it doesn't measure out statistically to be as big. But still, the example I'll use, I'll date myself a little bit. Keenan McCardell, he was really good statistically here with Jimmy Smith. He left. He went to go play with the Chargers and the Bucks. When he went to the Bucks, statistically he wasn't as important, but he won a title as the guy on the other side of Keyshawn Johnson when they won a championship. And to me, that changes the course of how we look at his career. So, yeah, at this point, whether he wants to realize it or not, he is at that stage where if you're going to take big money, you're going to be on a bad team. And if you're going to take okay money, you're going to be on a better team.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting debate, because on one hand, you could look at it and you could say, oh, well, he's got plenty of years left. He can still do it. He just turned 31. But to your point, you can get old quick, especially when you dominate at a level that he has. As of today, I don't think there is a chance that DeAndre Hopkins gets into the Hall of Fame. I think it's very, very hard for wide receivers to do so. I think you have to far and away be dominant for 10 plus years to get, and maybe down the line, far down the line, could he get in? Maybe, but probably not. 3-time All-Pro, 5-time Pro Bowler. That's not enough. 11,200 yards. It's a lot of yards. I'm not saying he's not accomplished, but that's not enough. So to your point, winning would certainly do that, being a big part of a winner. But to me, it's going to be as much about fit as anything. And we're going to talk about Dalvin Cook in a minute. And I think that Hopkins, assuming he's football smart and gets the X's and O's, and I haven't heard otherwise, I think he'll physically be able to do it in a few years and latch onto a contender. But to your point, I think the best way to do it is if he can find perfect football fit with a winner, make deep playoff runs, and be a part of it. And that's hard to do. There are guys that, might go from middling teams to contenders later in their career, and it doesn't necessarily work out. And looking around the league, I think Tennessee would be a bad fit for him for that reason. I don't think he would put up big numbers, even if it was a good fit. And even if he did gel with Ryan Tannehill, it's just not their style of offense. New England, I'm not sure he would be able to do that. So where could it be? I think that's the part of it, because if he is just at this next phase of his career and he's not a number one and he's a borderline number two, well, then, yeah, I buy this from Albert Breer, because if you're not getting big time money and you're not necessarily going to be guaranteed big time numbers, you at least want to have W's every week. And so the Chiefs make some sense to me. I know the Chris Jones, we talked about this last week, Chris Jones's potential extension, is there trouble in paradise there? If they get a deal done with him this offseason, that could lower his cap hit this year and open up the door for a DeAndre Hopkins signing, that would make sense to me. I think the Bills, at least on paper, would make sense to me. But he needs to decide what he wants. And if it is gold jacket, if it is Super Bowls, then try to find the place. And I think it would be Kansas City, where he'd be able to put up numbers and also contend for a Super Bowl, even if it means taking less money.
I think if he goes to Kansas City, that's a team that's a little bit different for me, because Kansas City, Juju went to Kansas City and was a huge part of their championship. And ain't nobody mistaking Juju for a Hall of Famer. I think Kansas City is one of those places they're going to win regardless, with or without you. So it's one of those situations where you either get down or lay down, right now with them. I don't think that
it's changes. Like New England used to be.
I don't think it changes his trajectory as much as what it does is it just kind of it almost feels like a lesser version of Kevin Durant going to Golden State. You know what I'm saying? Nobody's going to give you credit for being that guy. Go to a team that's close that hasn't done it though, and catch.
So you want him to go to the Jets? You want him to go to the Jets
or Buffalo? Go to one of those teams. Oh yeah, he could go to the Jets and team up with Aaron Rodgers. You know what? And catch 3 first downs on a game-winning drive in the championship game and see what happens to you. Just catch 3. Catch a 4th down. Catch a slant on 4th and 6 and get 7 yards. And then, that was...
I still need you to get 1,000 this year.
I need you to get 1,000 too, because when you look at his stats, if he had gotten another 2,000 yards in the injury season as well as the season where he was shortened because of his own suspension, we'd be talking about, instead of a guy having 11,000, we'd be talking about a guy that has 13 grand in yards. Now, with how he plays and who he is, there's nothing that tells me that he won't be able to play for another 4 or 5 years. I saw a thing the other day on Twitter where somebody said that the Jeremiah Cotchery signing, the Jamison Crowder, because they're the same guy, is an important signing for a team. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, didn't I have Jamison Crowder on a fantasy team 13 years ago? It feels like it, right? So guys like that have never been burners, but have been route runners, high point IQ football players, they tend to be able to play for a long, long time. I put him, if we were putting wide receivers at tables, I would put him at a table with Larry Fitzgerald as far as style is concerned, where it never plays out. Unlike Julio Jones, when your physical goes away, all of the other stuff goes away with it. I don't think he's like that. I think guys like him and Devontae Adams are going to be able to play until they want to stop playing, right? They're going to beat press coverage off the line. They're going to catch a slant. They're going to high ball and route run. So I think he has a chance to play for a number of years and pad those stats. If he gets 700 yards a year for the next 3 years, now we're looking at a guy with 14,000 yards, and hopefully he led a team to a championship that had never won one before. And now we start changing how we view him.
No doubt. I mean, if he goes to the Jets and is productive and helps them win there, that's going to go a long way. And so we'll see there. By the way, Jamison Crowder, 30. Same age as DeAndre Hopkins.
It just feels like Hopkins. He's been playing forever, dude. I'm serious. You heard me say Jeremy Cotchery because I thought it was
Jericho
the same
Cotchery.
dude.
Yeah.
But that's the same guy, right?
Same stylistically for sure.
So we don't confuse Edelman with Welker anymore. Now we just did it with Cotchery and Crowder, right? Same dude.
Same dude. Let's continue this conversation with something Dalvin Cook said earlier this week about DeAndre Hopkins and about the possibility of joining forces with the former All-Pro wide receiver. We will do that coming up next. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is a one-stop shop for all things sports wagering. Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with America's #1 sports book. FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. So don't miss your chance to get the no-sweat first bet today up to $1,000. All you have to do is go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. So whether you want to wager on the NBA draft, which is looming on Thursday night, maybe you want to get into some NFL futures bets, UFC, MMA, Major League Baseball, you can do all of those things by going to FanDuel.com/lockedon for your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
All right, segment 2 here on Locked On NFL on a Wednesday. You know, I almost said it, James. I almost let a Locked On Jaguars go, but I caught myself right in the middle of me saying it because I say that so much. But no, it's Locked On NFL here on a Wednesday. Make sure you tap in and make us your first listen. As always, we appreciate that because it's your team every day. And it is seriously every day, you know, when you have Locked On NFL. So, James, we're talking about Dalvin Cook. See, there's a dude with what you just said. It was a great segue. You didn't sit here and leave me guessing. He wants to play for a contender, and he probably wants to team up with DeAndre Hopkins, who we talked about in segment 1. See, that's what I'm talking about. Running backs, for all of this stuff that people talk about them not having value. See, here's a guy that understands his value. Here's a guy that's doing exactly what I said DeAndre Hopkins ought to do. Look, I got my bread, right? Now I need to go to a contender where I'm doing less but getting more results. I'm going to follow Christian McCaffrey and Leonard Fournette's lead as guys who were drafted in the same draft with me, and I'm going to go somewhere else. And I paid my dues playing bad football for these bad teams. So now I'm going to go, even though Minnesota's been a little bit better than Carolina and Jacksonville, the point still stands though. I'm going to go somewhere, do less, split a little time, don't mind going somewhere where they got another wide receiver that's going to move some of these guys out of the box, and I'm going to change the perception that people have of me, and I'm going to contend for a championship because I already got my dough in the trunk, so we're good with that, and I'm just going to become a winner. Leonard Fournette changed his entire legacy and became playoff Lenny and Super Bowl Lenny after what people really thought was a nondescript career here in Jacksonville, right? So now Dalvin Cook looks to be trying to do the same thing.
He's going to try to, and he was on the Adam Schefter podcast and talking about potentially joining forces with DeAndre Hopkins. And he said, quote, if we end up on the same roster, that would be something epic for the NFL. I know his mindset, and I've played against D-Hop numerous amount of times. I want to go win. Like I said, the money's going to come, and that's going to happen. But as far as going to lift that Vince Lombardi trophy up, he's got the same mindset as me. Okay, so let's say they have the same mindset. And let's say they say, we've had our Pro Bowls, we've put up our big numbers, it's time to join forces and do this. Where's the best fit? Because it isn't Kansas City. No. I'll tell you right now, it's not Kansas City, where you're right. DeAndre Hopkins would be one of, multiple weapons, all of those things. But running back friendly offense, I'm not buying that for the Chiefs. I don't think so. So for both guys, I'm going to give you my best fit because I think it's a team that DeAndre Hopkins already visited. It's the New England Patriots. It's a team that needs offensive weapons. It's a team that you look around and they have a young quarterback and they have some pieces in place. You mentioned Juju Smith-Schuster, but Devontae Parker isn't scaring anyone. No. I like Kendrick Bourne, the player. He's more of a fourth receiver, not a 1 or a 2. Tyquan Thornton can still take the top off of defenses. So you plug in a DeAndre Hopkins there. I think that's a really good fit. And then as far as that running back room goes, Ramondre Stevenson, Ty Montgomery, Pierre Strong, Dalvin Cook would be the lead back there. I think it would make a ton of sense. Both guys could come in, have an impact, a major impact on that offense. And the Patriots defense is very, very good still. You got Hunter Henry at tight end. I think it would complement each other well. And in a really tough AFC East, I think that it would make the Patriots, I don't want to say a force, but they would have the potential to be a force, assuming Mac Jones takes a step with more weapons around him.
I tell you what, I've said for months that the most challenging division will be the NFC North, the one that you cover, right? Because
AFC North.
The AFC North, I'm sorry. From top to bottom, all of the teams seem like they got an argument that they can go out and knock your head off on any given week. If the Patriots are able to do that, if they get both of those guys, they now have a really good defense. And even though their quarterback is, leaves a lot to be desired, and especially in that conference right now, with he's the Kirk Cousins of the AFC, right? But now you can't be that because they literally have like 7 guys that could be all pro. They got like 7 guys that could be MVP in that conference, or at least 6. So now you can't just be average. But the one thing the Patriots were always a talented team, and the guys all played for each other. The term we heard about the San Antonio Spurs forever, right? It seems like over the last few years, they have wanted to hold on to that football playing Jesse type, but they were more Rudies. They were not as talented. I think if you get the infusion of both of those players with Bill Belichick, meaning football IQ on 12 on a scale of 1 to 10, can roll out of bed and average 5 yards a carry, or roll out of bed and get 8 receptions in the case of the wide receiver. So the thing is they don't have those guys anymore. Remember Troy Brown was going both ways. Remember Teddy Bruschi was everything at outside linebacker, middle linebacker, after being the defensive end, and because they were just football players who also were extremely talented. Now they got guys who are really, really committed to playing football, but they don't have Gronk. They don't. It's whatever you want to say about Aaron Hernandez, they don't have that dude like that. They don't have guys that no matter what they're doing in their own time, when it come to playing football, they had like 10 Dennis Rodmans. Like no matter what he was doing, he was going to come rebound and he was going to come do his job. They don't seem to have those guys anymore. And if they're willing to accept that role, I think New England could be one of those teams that will slap people around on Sundays, and you look up and they won 12 games.
It's the best fit. Some will say the Bills, some will say the Jets, 2 AFC teams where you could take both guys in, and man, that would make a ton of sense. And Bills wise, there's just not enough cap space. We already talked about the Chiefs. Even if they do restructure Jones, I don't think there's enough space. The Browns could be a sneaky one, but Cook would have to be a reserve behind Nick Chubb. That just doesn't make sense to me. To me, the Patriots, it makes sense because it's almost like the Miami Heat. Everyone talks about Heat culture, and rightfully so. They were the lesser talented team, and arguably all 3 of their playoff series that they won and never trailed in, and beat the Nuggets in game 2, and it was a tough series, even though the Nuggets won in 5 games, and it's not even close talent-wise. Culture. I'm not saying that the Patriots would have as much talent as they did when they had Brady and all those guys that you mentioned, but if you plug in multiple weapons that are buying into the job, and you can pay them at a reasonable market rate, which the Patriots can because they have almost $15 million in salary cap space, this is the exact type of moves that will work for Bill Belichick. I think that's how you do it. And you know what you do? I would call Cook's people, and I would let DeAndre know that you want both of them, and that how you envision them and the role and all of those things, because I think it would be real easy if I'm DeAndre Hopkins or if I'm Dalvin Cook to look around, look at that defense, look at that head coach, realize that Bill O'Brien is the offensive coordinator and they don't have a former defensive mind manning the OC spot like they did last year. What a catastrophe that was. And start to buy into, the Patriot way is still here. It's not like the Patriots won 2 games last year. Still a good team. And I think Mac Jones is going to take a step forward. And so I think it would be an easy way to buy into this. And I know it's a tough conference. It's a really tough division. But I just sold myself on this idea. I think Hopkins and Dalvin Cook, if they want to team up, they should go to New England.
Yeah. And personally, the way I feel about Buffalo with Dalvin, I know he wants to play with his brother, but even though James Cook was a 4-star recruit, he was always Dalvin's little brother. I think now he's in his own space, and just the fan in me wants Dalvin to leave that and let that be for his little brother. You know what I'm saying? Just let James Cook be James Cook and be the version, whatever you're going to try to be in Buffalo, that's what he already is as a backup. So that's just leave that alone. But I agree with you. One thing about veteran football players, it's no nonsense. It's almost like Dame Lillard not wanting to play with a kid who only has 1 year. Give me a veteran. Yeah. One thing they appreciate competence. They appreciate trust. They appreciate veteran days off. and they appreciate the game plan being sound and things being done a certain. They don't have time. These dudes aren't out there. These dudes have endured car accidents, for the, not literally, but figuratively.
Yeah.
Every Sunday for their entire career. So if they're going to do that and make the sacrifice, they have to know that everybody else is on board. And who else is going to have their players on board more than Bill Belichick? Nobody.
Up next, we'll continue that conversation about veteran players, who's still out there, and if you shouldn't get your hopes up too much about some of the bigger names that are still on the market. We'll do that coming up next.
All right, as we roll along here on a Wednesday edition of Locked On NFL, it's your team every day, and we thank you for making us your first listen. I want to be very careful and not give a mulligan to the team that I'm about to mention, the Houston Texans. When the Houston Texans traded away DeAndre Hopkins for a second-round pick, right around the time, I think it was a year before, the Vikings got a first-round pick for Stephon Diggs. Everybody and their brother was saying that's not enough. Not only did they do that, they took the contract of an old running back, Johnson, and it was like, what, $11 to $14 million. So now
David Johnson.
David Johnson, you take a bad contract on, and so they really did get fleeced. And I was one of the people that were laughing because they got fleeced, because I cover a team in their division. However, looking back, even though Houston, and in large part, Deshaun Watson and his foolishness, and firing two coaches after only 1 year, and just being a hot mess of a franchise, looking back 3 years later, who would you rather be, Houston or Arizona? I'd rather be Houston. New coach, new quarterback, new enthusiasm, all of that other stuff out of the window. Arizona, who made that same trade, what did they get statistically in those 3 years while they were paying DeAndre Hopkins all of this money? And he's no longer there. Now he's on a little bus tour going from team to team trying to figure out where he's going to play. You better be careful when you do or make these trades to sign these older players, or players that may still be kind of in their prime but are over that apex that somebody else doesn't have a problem getting rid of. You have to ask why. Because if you ask me, just on that trade alone, Houston didn't lose, even though I thought they did. And even though everybody else picked at them for it, when you look back at it, they didn't. They absolutely, they did a lot of stupid stuff. And there's a whole bunch of people to blame. But looking back right now, I'd say Arizona did not get the bang for their buck when it comes to DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, I think the reaction at the time, and I think everyone had the same one, was how little he got traded for. I still think Bill O'Brien, and he's the one who made the trade, Bill O'Brien, the GM, got in the way of Bill O'Brien, the head coach.
Yeah.
But to your point, sometimes these offseason acquisitions that seem like home runs don't always work out. And sometimes there's hype, and it doesn't live up to the hype. Other times it gets crushed. Like Phoenix right now, a lot of people are down on the Suns, and I know we've had a lot of NBA references. Check out Locked On NBA. Shout out. A lot of people are down on what they did. They weren't going to be able to sign anyone big anyways. Like, no. I love that move for them because they were going to have basically a $12 million slot to use, and instead they turned it into Bradley Beal. Sign me up for that. And so I buy the hype there, but you don't always want to. And I think Arizona, they were given a gift of DeAndre Hopkins, and he didn't hold up his end either. But for a bunch of reasons, the organization didn't hold up their end. They went and spent big money on players like AJ Green, $6 million his first year there, JJ Watt, guys that were splashy and would get the headlines, but it probably didn't make sense. And that's why when we started with fit, all of these guys that are still out there, Ezekiel Elliott, Leonard Fournette, you guys are all rich. Zeke more than most. You guys are all rich.
Fact.
Find the right fit. Because if you don't find the right fit, you're going to be LaShawn McCoy, who went to Kansas City and whined and complained because he thought he still had something left, and it was not a good fit. Fit matters more than anything, and especially at the running back position. If there is not an obvious vision for you and you go somewhere on a low-end deal and you don't perform, that could be it. Even if you're on the right side of 30, even if you're 28 or 29, it happens quick in the NFL because there are running backs that come in to the draft every year and come into the league. And so even if you're a big name, find the right fit. I think that's an important part And going back, I'm going to just hammer it one more time. I hope I'm right about this. Dalvin Cook, really good fit in New England with DeAndre Hopkins.
I think he is.
Look at me, just going right back.
No. But normally I wouldn't think that, because I think all of these older players need to find one of those top 7 quarterbacks and plant himself right there. I think Zeke would be crazy not to go to KC, even though I just said the same thing about DeAndre Hopkins, but I ain't even trying to put Zeke in the Hall of Fame, right? I think he'd be crazy not to go to KC. I think Zeke would be crazy to not go to Philly. The only reason he wouldn't go to Philly is because he played in Dallas for so long, and he might be thinking about his future, the community he wants to live in. He might be thinking about how he would be remembered. And Calvin Hill might be the only Cowboy I can ever think of that's remembered as a Cowboy that played for his rival with Washington. It just doesn't happen. So if you're thinking long term, I think Zeke, has some options. I'd even choose the Chargers because they have a great quarterback, because they have a running back that might or might not want to be there after this year because of a contract. You have to go somewhere and do something where you give yourself an absolute chance to win at this point. And you make great, valid points about all of these guys. And there are tons and tons of examples as to, why you don't go to a place late in your career. It shouldn't be a matter of $1 or $2 million. And like I said, I'm not in anybody's pockets, but I just believe that you really, really, really have to go somewhere where you can win.
Yeah, I agree. Winning, fit, it's going to get you paid and keep you in the league. And we know how hard it is to stay in the league when you're on the wrong side of 30. He is Tony Wiggins. I'm James Rapien. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and check us out on YouTube. Follow wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, thank you so much for listening to another edition of Locked On NFL.